Yeah.
All right, good morning, St. Mark's. Thank you for joining us here today. I am very honored to introduce our speaker, Steve Okamoto. Mr. Okamoto is a survivor of Japanese internment, and he has dedicated his life to educating those on what happened during World War II. So please welcome me in joining Steve Okamoto.
Thank you, Tari. Good morning.
Good morning.
When I do my presentations, I kind of like to know my audience. So let me ask you a question. How many of you were born in San Francisco? We got 1, 2, 3, 4. Whereabouts in San Francisco?
Where was I born?
Yeah.
St. Mary's Hospital.
No. What neighborhood did you live in when you were born?
My parents were born and raised in Chinatown.
Chinatown? Okay. Where were you? What neighborhood?
Bernal Heights.
Bernal Heights.
And the Excelsior. And I went to Lowell. I hear you went to Lowell.
Did you know?
I was born on Gilmore, but raised on some road.
Well, I was born, back then they called it, right now they call it Lower Pacific Heights. But actually it was just on Bush Street, right up here, between Broderick and Baker. And I went to the elementary school right there on Pine and it was, anyway, it's called Cobb School now. I don't know, I forgot what it was called back then. Do any of you remember? So anyway, my dad and mom, they were also born here in San Francisco. Their parents, or my dad's parents, of course, were born in Japan. They came over here in the late 19th century. My dad was born in 08. My mom was born in 09. So also a very interesting, can you see me okay?
Yeah.
I'll kind of move around. I went to Lowell High, the old Lowell, went over on Masonic and Hayes, and then I went to Berkeley. We have a lot of Berkeley in our blood. My dad, believe it or not, was a graduate in 1933. I was a 63 grad. My oldest son was an 84 grad, and my second son in business school was a 2012. So we have a lot of Cal going on. But I appreciate Tony's invitation for me to speak because it's a subject that I'm very, very passionate about. I'm sure all of you, without having to go into all the way back in history, all know what happened to the Japanese during World War II. I won't go into all of the issues leading up to why the Japanese were selected to go into these camps, but that's a whole nother story. Tondri asked me to just speak about, what happened from after Pearl Harbor forward. So the presentation that I have is called Indignities, Resilience, and Gaman. I think Michiko knows what Gaman means, but maybe some of you don't. I think it'll be evident as we get through the presentation. Oops. Can we go back? Too many. There we go. I call it the Big Bang, which is kind of not a very nice word to use, but it all started with Pearl Harbor. Pearl Harbor, December 7th, 1941. A lot of people think this picture was of the USS Arizona, the battleship that was sunk. Actually, that's not, but that's the best picture, so we're going to use that. So it all started in 1941, and then in the next day, December 8th, 1941, President Roosevelt spoke to Congress, and his famous speech, about a terrible day, et cetera. But then in February of 1942, President Roosevelt, despite a lot of his advisors saying, don't do it, don't do it. Including J. Edgar Hoover of the FBI. He said, no, there's been no record of any sabotage or anything like that by the Japanese. But Roosevelt had other advisors who said, no, we are very concerned that the Japanese, their next target will be the west coast of the United States. So from Florida, from Hawaii, the border. So for national security, we need to remove the Japanese. Logistically, how do you remove 120,000 people of Japanese ancestry from 4 states, Washington, Oregon, California, and the southern tip of Arizona? Well, what they decided to do, is build, here's the executive order, it's being signed. What they decided to do is say, okay, all you Japanese, you have 2 weeks, and we are ready, you have to pack up your stuff, get on a bus, and we're going to take you somewhere. We don't know where, or we, the Japanese, don't know where we are taken. 2 weeks to wrap up everything. If you own a business, what do you do with your inventory? If you had a home, your refrigerator, your car, if you had a farm, tractor, and all your farm implements. These were unfortunate sales of desperation. People knew that you had to sell it. So this farmer bought a brand new tractor for $500. He had to sell it for $5. This happened over and over and over because the army said you can only bring what you could carry. So the Japanese had to what they call register. That was part of the deal on the Executive Order 9066. My dad went right here over on Bush Street. It's a Japanese school between Webster and Buchanan. They went in and they got tags that they were supposed to attach to their jackets and to all their suitcases. Well, the first indignity that we're going to list is your family is no longer the Okamoto family. You have lost that name. You are now family 19053. We were numbers. So on the tags, we put 19053 attached it to our suitcases and whatnot. We got in a bus. We had to walk. We lived over on Bush between Broderick and Baker, so we had to walk all the way down Bush, 5 blocks. Well, look at it this way. My dad, we had a family of 5. I was only 5 weeks old. So of course my mom had to carry me. My sister was 3. She had her little suitcase with her dolls and clothes. My mom had to carry me and a diaper bag. So it was left up to my dad to carry these heavy, heavy suitcases to where we were supposed to be picked up on the bus. So we got on a bus. The Army said, pull the shades down, and we'll let you know when you could open them again. Well, we got on here in Bush and we drove down. There was no Highway 101 right back then, but we did drive all the way from San Francisco down to San Bruno. We got to San Bruno, it was on El Camino. We went into this racetrack. It was called Dan Paran Racetrack. It burned down in 1964. So we get into the bus gets into the center. We get out, we look around. Where the hell are we? We've never been to San Bruno. let alone never been to a racetrack. So the Army said, okay, everybody get out and line up over there. We lined up, got registered. It says, okay, we have built a lot of barracks in the infield of the racetrack. Unfortunately, we don't have enough barracks. So you're gonna have to live in another building. Now, think about it, in a racetrack, what kind of buildings are there? There are a lot of nodding heads. Yes, horse stalls. Horse stalls. They said, that's your horse stall there. And see those canvas bags there? Those are your mattresses. See that pile of hay over there? You take those bags, fill it up, and that's your mattress. We were in Tanforan from April 28th, and it closed on October 13th, 1942. As I grew older, I asked my mom about what happened at Tanforan, and she said, you know, Steve, I don't remember too much about what happened. Kind of went out of my memory. But one thing I would never forget for the rest of my life, was the smell of the manure. The Army tried to whitewash it and clean it out, but it was in between the wooden slats. It was in the floor, it was in the ceiling. That smell of the manure, my mom said she never forgot for the rest of her life. A lot of people who we talked to since then said, yeah, I remember that. It was horrible. So here we are on our way to Tanforan, and the picture on the right is a very iconic photo. It's of the Mochida family of Hayward. The two little girls on the bottom left, Hiroko, who is 3, and Michiko, who is 5. We're going to see them a little later. But here they are, see the tags? They're waiting for a bus over in Hayward to bring them over to Tanforan. Tanforan, there were 8,000 of us. They were just all from the Bay Area, San Francisco, San Mateo, and Alameda County. So those 8,000 of us were at Tanforan. There's Michiko and Hiroko again. Now, notice what Hiroko, the little 3-year-old, has in her hand. It's hard to tell, but we think it's a musubi, or a rice ball. And we're going to see that again a little later as well. So this is Tanforan. The street in front is El Camino. I don't know, many of you may have never seen it. Right now it's the shops at Tanforan, which will not be there for very long. When we went into the camp, all of us had to go to the bathroom. The Army, they called it heads. They had a big sign, the heads are over there. Okay, if you have to go to the bathroom, go to the heads. So we walk in, and what do we see? This, rows and rows of toilets. No partitions, no privacy. There's stories of women who would not go to the bathroom until midnight when there was nobody there. This is a picture by Mine Okubo. She drew a lot of cartoons of Tanforan. But finally, the camp administrator said, okay, we will put partitions up, but we won't put doors because of national security. But you can see that the first stall there, the mother has her daughter covering it up with a blanket. But can you imagine having to live like this? Even the showers were the same thing. There were no partitions. So imagine, think about it, you going to take a shower with other women. Not a pleasant thought or a pleasant sight. We tried to make camp life as normal as possible. We had school, we had dances and whatnot. But let me digress just for a moment. Notice I said camp. When you think about a word like camp, it conjures up, oh, wow, we get to go boating and make macrame and all kinds of stuff. This was a ploy by the government to make it sound like that it's no big thing. They use what they call euphemisms. Euphemisms, one word to describe another. So they called it internment. They called it evacuation. They called it an assembly center. These were nice little words, but that's not what it was. They were detention centers. They were forced removal from homes. But that's how the government wanted to play it to the public. I have a newspaper that has a nice headline. The headline said, aliens and non-aliens shipped to the interior. But when you look at it very briefly, okay, aliens, non-aliens, okay, no big thing. But think about it. What's a non-alien? A non-alien is a citizen. But can you imagine the government saying aliens and citizens? Matter of fact, at Tan Fran and at all of the 10 camps around the country, over 65% of those people that were in there, including me, my mom, my dad, my sister, we were citizens. We were born here in the United States. So we were removed and sent to these camps without any due process. We had no constitutional protection whatsoever. So this is the kind of indignity that we had to deal with. So we had the indignity of losing our name. We had the indignity of showers without partitions, toilets without partitions, having to live in a horse stall, having to make our own mattresses. This is another indignity. Again, the Army called them mess halls. That's where we went to eat. We had to line up every morning, afternoon, and evening to get a meal. And all they were these picnic table type. And you can see all the metal trays that the kids had to eat. This is how it looked. Now at first, because everybody was kind of new and didn't know what was happening, all the families kind of got together and lined up. So you had one family here, one family here. But then as things got, I use the word normal in quotes, all the kids had their friends, all the moms had their friends, all the dads had their friends. So suddenly, all the kids were eating over there, all the moms were eating over there, and all the dads were eating over there. Now think about what happened to the family unit. Under normal circumstances, the family would sit, the dad would sit at the head of the table, the mom would cook and serve, the kids would sit around, and the dad would say, okay, what happened to you in school today? How was your day? That whole family unit crashed and burned, not only at Tan Fran, but the camp where everybody was sent from at Tan Fran was Topaz. That was in Utah, about 50 miles south of Salt Lake City. There were 10 camps. They were in the worst parts of the United States. They were in the mountains of Wyoming. They were in the deserts of Arizona and Utah. They were in the swamps of Arkansas. And they expected us to live for 3 years in those kind of conditions. But the Japanese were resilient. These are some of the indignities that I was talking about. Oh, the camps were lined by barbed wire. And so we said, hey, how come we got barbed wire and armed guards in these towers. Oh, well, that's for your protection. Oh, wait a minute. If it's for our protection, how come the guards are shooting or aiming their guns inward, not outward? So there were various means that the Japanese were used to cope with these indignities. We had music, we had sports. We did have classes. We did have some teachers that were willing to give classes. They were short, obviously, on textbooks and papers and pencils and stuff like that. But what was the real, how did the Japanese really cope? You know, what was under the surface? And this is where I think I am the most proud of the Japanese. There was a strong and important reason. And one of the things I call gaman. Gaman is something that's built into the Japanese DNA. And it means, you know, don't give up, persevere, continue. The last quote, go for broke. That was the war cry of, I'm sure you've heard of the 442nd Regimental Combat Team. This was a group of soldiers, all Japanese, who at the end of the World War II ended up being the most highly decorated unit of their size. There were 21 Congressional Medals of Honor, over 9,000 Purple Hearts. But that was their motto, go for broke, just go, doesn't matter. Your body gets shot, doesn't matter, go. You got my body exploded, doesn't matter, go. That was the thing, go for broke, and that was all come on. There's another one that I use even today, it's called shikata ga nai. Shikata ga nai is basically, it can't be helped. Hey, you're faced with this dilemma, you can't do anything about it, so just, you can't be helped. I actually use it today because, in today's life, because let's say you're driving up 101, which I do often, and there's a big traffic jam. There's no way to change lanes. There's nothing you can do. You can honk your horn, but that's not going to be as good. So I employ that term, shikata ga nai. Nothing I can do about it. And I'll tell you, it really helps with your high blood pressure because you can just calm down. But shikata ga nai and gaman were two very, very important traits that the Japanese employed to be able to cope with all this indignities that they had to face. So in closing, what I wanted to talk about is the Tanforan Memorial. I don't know if any of you have gone out to see it. It's at the San Bruno Art Station right behind Tanforan Shops. I had the honor of being the vice chairman of the committee that formed this. We started in 2012, where we started designing it and getting funding for it. We were able to get fairly significant funding from the National Park Service, around $400,000. The County of San Mateo realized how important this particular memorial is. So with their Measure K funds, they gifted me $250,000. The city of San Bruno obviously realized how important this iconic statue and memorial is to the city. So they donated $110,000. But we had significant funding. We had a lot of community and political support. Our biggest supporter was Jackie Spear. She was with me from the very beginning all the way to when we had the ribbon cutting in August of 2022. So I urge all of you to go there because, didn't have that one. If you notice, the centerpiece is this statue right here. I remember to put the statue in my next presentation. That's Hiroko and her sister. And the artist took that picture of them, the Mochida family, and did a miracle with the facial features of Hiroko and her sister. Because if you look at it, you'll see exactly what these girls are feeling of confusion, despair. What's happening? So please go out. On the back right, those are panels that have the names of every person that was imprisoned at Anne Assembly Center. 8,000 of them. On the left is just a depiction of a horse stall. The horse stall was 9 by 20 deep, but there was in 2 sections. The first one is 9 by 8, and then the other one was 9 by 12. We had it totally enclosed, looked just like a horse stall, but the San Bernardino Police, which is stationed is right next door, said, no, you can't have it enclosed because there's going to be a lot of homeless sleeping there. So you have to have it opened up. So that's the depiction of what the Tan Fran Memorial. The flowering cherry tree is there and it's flowering. It's surprising how this artist or this architect's depiction is exactly what it looks like. So I urge you to go to the Tan Fran Memorial. Again, it's right outside the San Bruno BART station. BART was very generous and they donated that particular project to us. And of course, it's at the back of the Tan Fran shops. I said again that the Tan Fran shops will no longer be there. A company called Alexandria Realty purchased it last year. And what they're going to do is they're going to tear down almost all of Tan Fran Shopping Center. The movie theater will remain. And then that big building on that white building behind, that's Target. They're going to move Target and rebuild it right on the corner of El Camino and what's the name of that street? Anyway, it's going to be much more visible. And then on the left side, it's going to be just biotech. And on the right side, besides the movie theater, there'll be some residential because of the BART station and some very light commercial, like the Starbucks type of thing. So we spent 10 years building this. And right now we're very, very proud of it. We've had hundreds of visitors. When we had the ribbon cutting, we were surprised. We had over 700 people in front of the BART station. It was just crazy. We never expected that many people. But it's there, and I urge you, after this, after people went from Tan Fran, they all went to Topaz. They took a train from Oakland over to Salt Lake City, and then a bus 50 miles south. So that's where they landed up for August of 1945. They actually were able to leave if they wanted to leave in 1943. The government realized, ooh, we screwed up. Just typical. That we really can't afford to house and feed 120,000 people. So they said, all right, any of you who want to leave the camps, you may do so. There's only 3 provisions. The number 1 is you can't go back. You got to go east. 2 is you have to either have school or a job. And 3, you have to have someone back there who will accept you. So with that, over 30% of the people left. And that's sort of a side story that in Detroit, Minneapolis, Chicago, there are more Japanese than out here in California, because all of them went back to Chicago, Minneapolis, and Detroit, and decided to stay. Said, I don't want to go back to California. Unfortunately, many did. We did, my family, and it was pretty horrible because even though we, American-born Japanese, had nothing to do with the war, people here said, you killed my brother. I said, wait a minute. That was unfortunate for many, many years. Doctors, lawyers, they came back. They could not practice, and they had to be houseboys or gardeners. So it was tough for many, many years. But with that wonderful, cheerful note, I will end my presentation, and I really ask you for questions. So if you do, let me give you this mic. Okay, Tom will be my mic person. So if you have a question, please.
Would you speak to what considerations, I expect not accommodations, but considerations were given to the very elderly who were now in these, harsh for anybody, but for the elderly, it must have just been real suffering. Can you speak to what, if any, considerations?
Any considerations to the seniors? Well, back then there was no ADA, unfortunately, so there were no accommodations for the elderly, none. You would just have to go with the flow. We were, to them, prisoners, so there was no accommodation. Any other questions?
I do have.
There were certain properties I know that were kind of taken care of by people who were allies to Japanese citizens, people who cared about the people who were being carted off and actually were opposed to this. Do you know how many people were able to return to their property or their farms, their whatever it was?
As far as people coming back, no, I don't have that number, but I do want to mention that many of the churches, like St. Mark's and whatnot, they stored a lot of their parishioners' home goods and whatnot. And when they came back, they were able to recover a lot of that. But at the same time, a lot of us would store it in warehouses that were vandalized, unfortunately.
So St. Mark's sits very close to Japantown. My understanding is Japantown was quite a bit larger before the war, and then afterwards it became much, much smaller. Did you return to this area immediately after the internment? And then also, just a side note from a St. Mark's perspective, I don't know if we know how the extent to which St. Mark's did assist in any way. And so you probably don't have that answer, but it's something I'm fascinated by, whether the congregation here at St. Mark's, given our proximity to Japantown, what role, if any, we played in assisting.
Yeah, as far as role, I'm just assuming that since they were so close. But I do have one word you mentioned about it's a lot smaller, redevelopment. I don't know if many of you remember in the 60s, we had a redevelopment director, surprisingly, who was honored with a plaza down by the ferry building, who said, no, what we got to do is make this more whatever. So he tore down a lot of the homes right here on Geary, Geary Post, all the way down to Fillmore, and just leveled this whole area. Part of it was built in the late 60s with the, back then it was called the Japanese Cultural and Commercial Center. They had a theater, dinner theater, had a beautiful hotel. Of course, a lot of that's changed since then. But yeah, it's a lot smaller. unfortunately, mainly because most of the Japanese who did live here don't live here anymore. They either live out in the Richmond or the Sunset, or even like with me, my wife and I moved to Foster City in 1978. So we've been there for 46 years. My dad and mom were still here before they died. My brother, Alan, he still lives here because he has a business in Japantown. So that's quote progress, I guess. Any other questions?
I wonder,
We'll give you a mic.
I wonder how the Gopher Broke and It Is What It Is has affected your life as a later student and adult.
Okay, how is Gopher Broke and the Come On and Chicago has affected? Gopher Broke, again, was the battle cry for the 442nd Regimental Combat Team. And all of us have relatives who were in World War II, you know, the greatest generation. And I believe that. And the same thing I believe with the 442nd boys. To me, they're heroes, because what President Truman said after the war, he said, boys, you fought 2 battles, one in the battlefield and one at home, and you won. Because I think that because of the exploits of the 442nd, that changed a lot of people's minds about the Japanese. There's one good quick story about the 442nd. They were able to withstand terrible guns and bombs and whatnot to rescue this battalion of soldiers who are all from Texas. They call it the Lost Battalion. They saved them. They saved 112 people while losing 600. But because of that, when Hawaii, the discussion of Hawaii statehood in 1959 came up, the Texas delegation 100% supported that because of what the 442nd did for them in World War II. So definitely the 442nd was very important. Any other questions? Chandra, we have a question down here.
Was there ever any effort by the Congress to compensate the Japanese in California or anywhere else for their losses?
You know, he's almost like a plant asking that question. Because in 1977, I was living here, very active in the Japanese community. And one of the things we said, you know, we've got to get some sort of compensation. In today's dollars, the Japanese lost with their homes and business and farms over $40 billion worth. Back then, of course, it was a lot less, but today, $40 billion. So yeah, we got to get some compensation from the government. So we began this lobbying campaign with Congress, led by Senator Dan Inoue. I'm sure you all know him, and other Japanese congressmen. They went to their fellow congressmen and they didn't say, you know, we need a bill to compensate the Japanese. Because a lot of people from the South, they said, no, I don't care about them. But what they did is they said, we need to have a bill because the government deprived them of their constitutional rights. I can get behind that. So because of that, in 1988, President Reagan signed the Civil Rights Act of '88, which allowed compensation to those people who are still living, about $60,000, a minor check for $20,000. Not a whole lot, but at least it was something. But what was most important in that envelope with the check? There was a letter that was signed by senior President Bush. And that letter, for the first time in the history of the United States, said, I'm sorry. First time they apologized. And many of us, including me, have that letter framed and put on my wall, because that's so much more important than that $20,000. So yeah, we did get somewhat compensated, but most importantly, we were apologized for. Okay, we have one last question.
Okay, thank you so much. This is not so much a question as a statement that when I was growing up, this was not in our history books about the internment camps, that nothing was there. And it wasn't until the late 60s that I dated somebody that knew about the internment camps because he was Japanese. And I was so shocked that I never knew anything about it. And I was so grateful that he told me what had happened. That, you know, and I think it's so sad that we covered so much up, you know, and I'm not sure what you can say to that. I'm sure you're aware of that.
My son married a young lady from New York. And so when we went back to visit and meet her parents, you know, I said, hey, Steve, what do you do? Well, I do this and this. And I also speak. And so, yeah, what about? So I explained, I said, what? What are you talking about? They had no clue on the West Coast or anywhere west of the Rockies or east of the Rockies of what the Japanese had to go through, mainly because of the government keeping it quiet. They used those euphemisms and they didn't make it a big deal. But yeah, it was really shocking. Finally, in the late 70s, again, part of my activism here in San Francisco, we met with the head of the education department in Sacramento and convinced them to talk to their book people to include what happened. At first, it was just one line, you know, Japanese were evacuated, but now we have full explanation and education for all the kids. And that's one of the things that I do. I go to high schools. I've been to Balboa, Washington, Lowell, here in the city, and then down on the peninsula to talk to the high school kids during their U.S. history time. Because this is something that is so important, not only just because of the education, but as with the memorial, it's there for them to memorialize the 8,000, but more importantly, it's there to remind people that something like this can never happen again. And that's what I'm trying to educate people about. So thank you very much for your attention. Thank you, Tanri.
Thank you.